Okay, and next is Whit Schroder from the University of Florida. And feel free to take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be talking about some of the work that I've been doing, also with remote sensing data, but with a more archaeological application. I do collaborate with other researchers as well, who are working in more of a sort of earth sciences approach, but I'll be talking more about archaeology. And then to skip ahead, just
I need to click it open now. Let's just take that home first. Not sure.
Great. So I really liked what David started off saying today about how we're sharing these great technologies, but we always have to keep in mind what we're going to be doing with them, what questions we're asking, how it's informing our research. And my area of research is primarily in landscape archaeology. So this is looking beyond just what we call a traditional site-based approach, where we have a specific archaeological site, and traditionally in the past it would be excavated and the objects would be analyzed and that kind of detailed work, which is still very important. But looking outside and beyond just that site-based approach and looking more broadly at the landscape surrounding sites, understanding the ecological context of where people lived, looking at the ways that people traveled across the landscape, looking at the ways that people in agrarian societies, how they worked the land, in hunter-gatherer societies, for example, how people moved across the landscape and looked for resources. These are all things that are really interesting to me from a landscape archaeology perspective. So the tool set that I use for the most part is an airborne laser scanning tool. And I'll be talking about different ways that we've been using LiDAR in airborne techniques from airplanes and from drones. But essentially it's a scanning technique that allows us to map the surface of the Earth with very high accuracy and high precision. And for archaeology, we really like that high resolution LiDAR data where we can begin to see what we call archaeological features or features of the built environment that were constructed and that have been modified over time as well. We're really looking at what we call a palimpsest, where we're looking at the landscape as it is today, essentially, but we're interpreting what we see today and trying to interpolate that and understand what was going on in the past. And this is just an example here of a type of hillshade model, just one of these kinds of derivative models that we can move from the elevation material. The really critical use of LiDAR for archaeological purposes is, of course, for mapping the bare earth or the terrain. And so this would be a landscape that at one time, that today has vegetation very likely, but we're able to filter out and classify these different parts of the landscape so that for the archaeological application, we can look just at the terrain to understand archaeological features. LiDAR was used, has been used in archaeology for some time now, but one of the probably earliest and most well-known uses of LiDAR was in the Maya region, which is where I work. And this is really southeastern Mexico, parts of Central America, associated with the Maya civilization, the ancestors of the modern Maya people today. And a site called Caracol in Belize was one of the first uses of LiDAR to map an archaeological site. And you can see we get really good resolution. We can see the pyramids, which of course are very large here, but we can even see these kinds of smaller features that are agricultural terraces built into the hill slope. And we can begin to look at the smaller constructions, which would have been the houses of the farmers. And we can see their reservoirs where they excavated to create these reservoirs for holding water. Were very important in this environment where we have prolonged dry season. And so this has been sort of highlighted as the really first successful use of LiDAR for archaeology in the Maya area. The work that I've been involved with, it's actually a data set that's not too different from what we were just hearing about from a NASA system called G-LIGHT, which involves a LiDAR sensor, a thermal sensor, a hyperspectral sensor, which is where you get the acronym LIGHT, LiDAR, hyperspectral, thermal. And so some of the data here that we have are these kinds of linear, sort of more linear types of surveys. The orange ones here are larger sort of coterminous surveys, but the NASA G-Light data was a vegetation biomass study that essentially just did a single flight path across these parts of southeastern Mexico. And so we've been adapting that for archaeology. The area that I work in mostly, just to give you a visual of what some of these places look like on the ground, Palenque is probably pretty well known to people here, but it's really this kind of part of the western part of what we call the Maya lowland tropical environment that surrounds that site of Palenque. These are some of the data sets that I've been using. As I mentioned, the G-Light, and you can see that this is a pretty narrow flight path. There's no scale on there, but the flight paths are about 300 meters wide, but they cover thousands of kilometers in length across southeastern Mexico. And then another data set that I've used, this is a collaboration with the National Center for Airborne Laser Mapping. And they're based, I believe, at the University of Houston currently. And so that was a survey that was planned with them. And so we actually, the archaeologists, were involved in planning the actual survey area, whereas with the G-Light, we're just sort of repurposing a legacy data set. And both of those are LiDAR systems mounted on an airplane. And then the third one is another data set that I've used that I've collaborated with researchers here at UF. They call their group Gator Eye. And they have a drone-based LiDAR system. And so again, that was a system that we planned with them, a study area that we planned. But of course, being mounted on a drone, we're more limited in terms of how long the drone can stay up in the air with battery power. So we can only map much smaller areas. I believe this is probably about 3 to 4 square kilometers, whereas this is maybe 200 square kilometers. And then this in total is, as I said, 300 meters by thousands of kilometers in length. And this is one of the projects that I've been involved with. The study was originally a RED Plus study in southeastern Mexico, and that's where the data set originally came from. And so this is kind of what we're looking for. The first step is always to kind of see what's there, right? So to identify and to annotate the features that we have. And so you can see, and again, this is one of those hillshade models. So this is taking the elevation data from the bare earth, and it's doing an algorithm to make it look to a human eye more like what the landscape might look like in that kind of bare earth sort of model. And you can go through there and you can start marking up what you're seeing, these little sort of plaza spaces with structures surrounding them, agricultural terracing, usually right along the hill slopes following the contours of the hills. And then these other interesting types of features, these are probably walled features of some kind, either with stone, most likely with limestone, which is local to the area, or perhaps some of them are earthen, built out of earthen materials. But we're seeing perhaps some agricultural type of infrastructure here. And then we've expanded this with the drone-based system here, again, through UF. And in fact, some of these flights with the drone-based system were done at the exact same time as the NCALM airplane-mounted system. So we're literally setting up the drone here, and that right up there, that's the drone, I believe. And then I believe that's the airplane they're flying at the same time. So we have really good data in terms of the exact same area being mapped at the exact same time with these two different systems. So these are some of the more, some more of the areas. So this is that G-Light data shown here. And then this is just kind of what we've been adding with that NCALM data set, which is our own sort of system that we've, our own study area that we've designed. And then these areas are the drone that we've added in there. And then we've just gotten more data, and we're just getting more and more over time. So we got a lot of data right now that we're sorting through. This is an example of one of these contexts where we might take our G-Light data, which is that transect, and we'll pick a spot where we want to get the wider context of that transect, and we'll do a mapping mission with the drone to expand. We work off of the point cloud as well, so I'm showing you some kind of raster derivatives, but just to be clear, the point data is the kind of raw data, which is really coming directly out of the LiDAR mapping mission. And then anything that we come out of that, that's an interpolation of it. So it's sort of like a mesh that we're creating by triangulating those points. We can look at these changes over time with these two systems. So the G-Light, this particular mission was flown in 2013. Our drone was in 2019. So we can do change detection. We can track destruction to the archaeological resources. We can also do change detection with vegetation as well, and see any sort of deforestation over time. So some of the takeaways that I just want to emphasize is that we're just sort of in the middle of this process. And so we're doing most of this work remotely right now, but the goal is, of course, to do ground truthing and to do work on the ground with communities, and to be sure to integrate this work with people living in the region today. And collaboration is very important. And thinking about how these data can help the modern communities in the region. And then a critical sort of project is to move beyond just using LiDAR in archaeology for site prospection, which is just looking at the LiDAR data and finding interesting things and identifying archaeological sites, which is very important, but kind of moving beyond that. And now we have all these large data sets. How can we automate some of this? How can we use machine learning? And how can we start to understand the broader socio-environmental context of some of these data sets? I just have a couple examples of work that I've done, sort of looking at different environmental variables, social variables, and comparing them with settlement density that we're getting from the LiDAR. And these have been published if anyone's interested. This was a sort of research project that was to look at kind of the variation in structure size and looking at the Gini index of inequality compared to these different variables, and then looking at physiographic regions as well, understanding that environmental context. So I just want to thank all of these funding organizations and, of course, all my collaborators for helping me do this research. I look forward to the Q&A if there's any questions.
Thank you.